Apologize. I missed a lot of the hearing. I was presiding, but I know this is a very, very important topic for my constituents, I think for all Americans, and we really appreciate your testimony and focusing on it. So if this question was asked earlier, please forgive me, but I know this issue of pushing out the perimeter in terms of safety at airports is something that many of us, many in the agency, many advisors like yourselves are looking at. How should we think about this? Because there's obviously, you look at some of where the terrorist attacks have been focused, whether, recently, unfortunately, in Florida or in Europe, and it seems to be this kind of soft target area of in the airports, but beyond the security perimeter. So, again, if you've already discussed this, please accept my apologies, but I think it's a really important issue that a lot of us have questions about. And how do we look at the balance?
Maybe I'll start, if I may. I'm Kim Day with Denver International Airport. I think we all agree that if you move the checkpoint closer to the entry, then all you're doing is moving the problem. You're not solving the fact that there is a pre-checkpoint area that you have to defend. And there are lots of ways you can do that. Today, the airlines have information on passengers. Even when you check in, you can be risk-based through a database. There is technology being evolved that can passively screen you for large amounts of metal or for explosives. We talked about using dogs. Dogs are wonderful, and they could roam the area and give an extra level of security. I think the day is going to come when every door in the airport has some passive detector that you don't even know you're passing through as you open the door, or if you get off the train at our platform, or you go up an escalator. So that day is coming with all the great technology that the private sector is developing. Great.
That's very helpful. Any other comments on that?
Well, you also missed a discussion. We all agree that we love dogs and that the canine program is one that really needs to be, the capacity for training those dogs needs to be expanded, and we need to figure out more ways where we can get more dogs. And the dogs can be used in the public area access as well.
Let me ask another question. I mean, we often focus on TSA and the threats with regard to passenger terminals, which of course is appropriate given we want to protect our citizens. My state is also a big state for the hub of cargo, air cargo. And I would just like to know from the threat perspective, what do you see as the biggest threats to places like Anchorage International Airport that are, one of the biggest cargo hubs in the country, if not the world, and how do we address those?
I think they are being addressed in the routine day-to-day operations of the all-cargo industry, who operates significantly at Anchorage. The issues are slightly different. One thing we've discovered, I mentioned it before, in terms of all airports not being the same, and you have to tailor your response to the threats being presented. Neither is the airline industry a unitary body, and the threats are different in the cargo area. That's why we all operate under different security programs. All of our carriers that operate all cargo flights have proven to be very secure. They are screened for threats. They are threat-based. One thing we could use is perhaps a better flow of intelligence information. One of the things that really impressed me with certain things that have happened throughout the world is the best way to really manage threat is to have the best intelligence. But on a day-to-day basis, all of our members do the screening that's necessary by our security program, and do more than that, actually. And there really hasn't been much of a problem. Our operations are threat-based. We have perhaps as good intelligence capabilities from our people around the world as does the agency. And the key is to share that information, to get the information to all our carriers and to the airports, so that we can respond to individual threats. But on a daily basis, it works through the application of our security program, and we're confident that we're doing the job.
Then let me ask, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just one final question on the balance between kind of urban and rural airports. And again, I know that TSA has to look at that. Again, in my state, we have a number of airports that are very, very small, but very, very important. And some have a lot more intensive screening than others. How do you recommend that that balance be looked at? Is it primarily threat-based, meaning, you know, small communities that are not really connected to many other parts of the state or the country are viewed in a much kind of lower threat capacity? Because, as you know, if we all want protection, but if the measures and requirements become so burdensome, you actually, in some communities, certainly in Alaska, you can risk pricing small local commuters and airlines out of that market. How do you guys recommend that we look at that balance?
Everyone's looking at me, so I'll take a shot at it. I think because they don't want to answer the question. I said earlier, and it's true. You've seen one airport. You've seen one airport. That's not my line. It's the airport's line. But I think that we have to provide adequate security at all airports. We can't afford at a local small airport someone getting into the system and then doing havoc somewhere else, or even at the local airport. But that doesn't mean all the measures have to be the same. And what we have to ensure is we have to understand what the outcome has to be. We have to understand what the goal of the security measures are, and that I think the way we should be looking at security generally, not just the difference of small airport, big airport, is that we should demand that the outcome be the same, but the way to get to that outcome may be different depending on each entity, whether it's a small airport versus a big airport, whether it's a cargo airline versus a passenger airline, even within all those parameters. I happen to think, and I think our industry happens to think, the best way to proceed is to make sure that TSA establishes the elements and the goals of what we have to accomplish, and then monitor how that's being done. But it should be up to the regulated parties who are responsible for airports and airlines to best tailor their operations to meet the established goal of the agency.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.